welcome to our deep dive into a big one.
Oh, yeah.
How do Islam and Buddhism look at the concept of God?
That's right. Two of the biggest religions in the world, totally different parts of the globe.
And we've got all this cool stuff to dig into, like...
academic papers, for sure.
Right, and...
historical accounts, and...
what's really interesting...
spicy online debates about it.
Our mission here, to find those, like...
those little nuggets of insight, you know, the kind that shift your perspective.
Yeah, on these two massive faiths.
Yeah, and it's more than just, like, listing bullet points of beliefs. It's like, why do people believe this stuff?
Yeah.
What makes these ideas so powerful to so many people?
Yeah, how do those beliefs shape, like, everyday life?
Exactly.
So, first up, Islam 101.
All right, Islam. Super rooted in this idea of Tawheed.
Okay.
Oneness of God.
Okay.
Allah.
I see.
And it's not just some theological concept. It's like totally woven into being Muslim.
Right. And that's where the Shahada comes in.
The declaration of faith, yeah.
There is no God but God.
Super clear, super powerful.
Yeah, but you mentioned shirk.
Shirk is the opposite, like associating anything else with God.
Like polytheism.
Exactly. Huge no-no in Islam.
Yeah, because it challenges that idea of God's total uniqueness.
Right. God's sovereignty.
Okay, so for Muslims...
one God, no partners.
No equals.
Got it.
Crystal clear.
All right, so that's Islam. But what about Buddhism? Do they even have a concept of God?
See, that's where things get kind of interesting. Early Buddhism, it wasn't really about a creator God at all.
Huh, okay.
Much more about, like, what does it mean to be human?
Right.
Understanding suffering.
Suffering.
And how to, like, break free from it.
That's already so different from Islam.
Yeah, it is.
So how did the idea of God even show up in Buddhism later on?
Great question. So as Buddhism developed, they started talking about Dharma.
Dharma.
It's a tricky one to translate.
Okay.
Sometimes it's like cosmic law or truth or even like the essence of reality. So is Dharma like their God?
It's not that simple.
Yeah.
Like, they both represent something ultimate, right?
Right, okay.
But Dharma isn't a personal God that you, like, pray to.
Okay.
More of a guiding principle, a truth you try to live by.
So Buddhism is more about self-discovery then?
Yeah.
Inner transformation guided by Dharma.
Exactly.
Instead of, like, worshiping God like in Islam.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But our sources also show some surprising links between them too.
Yeah, there are some.
Like both religions talk about a single ultimate truth.
Right, like a deeper reality.
Whether it's Allah in Islam or Dharma in Buddhism.
Exactly.
Like this human desire for something beyond just everyday life.
Yeah, like what's the point of it all? You know, what's the bigger picture?
I see.
And there's this idea in Islam, al-Samad, describing God as being completely self-sufficient. Okay. Like the ultimate goal of everything.
That reminds me of how Buddhists talk about Dharma like it's full.
And everything else is empty.
Right.
So you're seeing it now. Like, even with different words, different cultures.
Totally.
These big religions touch on the same profound ideas.
It makes you wonder if we can learn from each other's traditions, even when they seem so different on the surface.
Absolutely.
But, of course, we also have to talk about the stuff that makes things tricky, right?
Oh, yeah, the elephants in the room.
Yeah, where these two religions clash.
Those differences are super important. Like, how do we achieve salvation? How do we get free from suffering? Big one, right?
Yeah, break it down for me. What are the differences there?
So, in Buddhism, it's all about your actions, your karma. You gotta break free from the cycle of suffering yourself.
Through your own actions?
Yeah, by following the ethical path.
I see. But in Islam?
Islam puts it in God's hands.
So it's about surrendering to God's will.
Exactly, following his guidance.
So it's like human effort versus divine will.
That's it.
And that probably affects how each faith looks at life's challenges in general, huh?
Oh, absolutely.
And what about the role of prophets?
Yes. Well, Islam has this clear line of prophets all the way to Muhammad.
Who delivered the final revelation.
Right. Messengers from God guiding us.
Showing us the way.
Exactly.
But Buddhism doesn't have that.
No, not really.
So Buddha's more like a teacher.
Yeah, like a guide who found the path to enlightenment and said, hey, come check this out.
So Buddhism focuses on his teachings and practices.
Yeah.
Not on needing, like, a middleman to God.
It's about changing yourself from the inside out, understanding the Dharma.
That makes a lot of sense. And these differences probably have a big impact on how these faiths approach, well, talking to each other, right?
Interfaith dialogue, yeah.
Exactly.
It shapes how they interact, how they see each other.
Which is super relevant today. Because finding ways to coexist peacefully is, well, kind of essential.
Couldn't agree more.
And those different approaches to dialogue, they show up everywhere.
Throughout history, even in current events.
And we've got some fascinating historical accounts of those interactions between Muslims and Buddhists.
Oh, yeah, we do.
We'll have to dive into those in part 2 of our deep dives.
Definitely.
I'm excited to unpack those.
Me too. So those historical encounters, right? One of the most fascinating things is how those different views on dialogue actually played out.
Yeah, like what happened on the ground?
Well, there are records from like the 7th century of the Prophet Muhammad sending letters to different rulers, like the Byzantine Emperor Heraclius.
Inviting them to Islam?
Yeah, basically.
Was it all about conversion then?
The letters definitely laid out the main beliefs of Islam.
Right.
Presented it as the true path.
Sure.
But they also emphasized common ground, especially the belief in one God.
Interesting. So kind of a two-pronged approach.
Yeah, like, hey, this is what we believe and we think it's the best, but also let's find ways to coexist peacefully.
I see.
And this wasn't just a one-time thing either.
Okay.
Centuries later, we see the Umayyad Caliph, Umar Abdulaziz, doing the same thing, sending a letter to a Buddhist Maharaja in Srivijaya.
Wow. So this engagement with other rulers, even with the aim of spreading Islam, continued for a long time.
It did, yeah. It shows how faith and diplomacy have always been intertwined.
Fascinating stuff. But how did Buddhists approach this interaction, with their emphasis on individual enlightenment and open discussion?
They have this tradition called Dharma discussion.
Okay.
Where debates and discussions were encouraged.
Like open forums.
Exactly. Both within the Buddhist community and with people from other faiths.
So less about converting others to Buddhism and more about exploring different ideas.
Yeah, Buddhist texts really emphasize open-mindedness, critical thinking.
I see.
Learning from different perspectives.
That's such a contrast to the Islamic approach.
Yeah.
But did these different approaches ever actually lead to direct interactions? Like, did Muslims and Buddhists ever sit down and, talk shop?
Oh, for sure. There are accounts of Buddhist monks traveling to Muslim lands.
Wow, really?
Engaging in philosophical debates with Islamic scholars.
That's amazing. Can you imagine? Debates about the nature of God, the soul, the meaning of life.
All that happening across cultures and languages centuries ago.
Talk about a deep dive. It's incredible to think of those conversations shaping intellectual thought across huge distances. But what about today? How do those different approaches play out in the modern world?
Well, there's both continuity and evolution, you should say.
Okay.
Muslims are still engaged in what's called dawah, often translated as invitation or calling to Islam.
So is that still primarily about conversion? Trying to convince others to embrace Islam?
It's not quite that simple. A lot of scholars emphasize that dawah isn't necessarily about pushing for immediate conversion.
I see.
It's more about presenting Islam in a positive light.
Sharing its beauty and wisdom.
Right, allowing people to make their own choices.
So it's about presenting the option.
Exactly.
But not forcing it on anyone.
Yeah, and it's also about strengthening the faith of existing Muslims.
That makes sense. It aligns with that Quranic principle.
No compulsion in religion.
Exactly. But what about modern-day Buddhists? Are they still all about that open, exploratory approach to dialogue?
For the most part, yeah.
Okay.
But with a new layer, you could say.
What do you mean?
Well, today, a lot of Buddhists are really focused on social issues.
Interesting.
And promoting peace, not just individual enlightenment.
So it's like a more outward-facing Buddhism?
You could say that.
More engaged with the world?
Exactly. They see dialogue with other faiths as crucial for tackling things like poverty,
environmental issues,
tolerance, all that.
So it's like putting those Buddhist principles into action, right?
Yeah.
Compassion, interconnectedness.
Absolutely. And we see some really cool collaborations happening.
Oh, yeah.
Buddhist and Muslim organizations working together on humanitarian aid.
Wow.
Peace building, social justice, all sorts of stuff.
That's really inspiring. It shows that despite theological differences, shared values can really make a difference.
Yeah, they can be a powerful force.
But even with the best intentions,
right,
differences can lead to friction, right?
Of course, it's not always smooth sailing.
Where do those stumbling blocks usually pop up?
One common one is those different views on conversion we talked about.
Right. Some Muslims see dialogue as an opportunity for dawah.
While Buddhists generally don't focus on proselytizing.
Yeah, I can see how that could lead to misunderstandings.
Totally. Some Muslims might feel frustrated.
Like their Buddhist counterparts aren't receptive.
Exactly, and Buddhists might feel pressured.
Or uncomfortable.
Yeah, like they're being pushed towards something they don't want.
It's almost like they're speaking different languages, even when using the same words.
Right.
And I imagine historical baggage and stereotypes don't help.
Oh, absolutely. Those preconceived notions.
Fueled by the media, personal experience,
You can really cloud the dialogue.
make it hard to have a genuine conversation.
For sure.
And sadly, those negative stereotypes are often reinforced by current events.
Like conflicts in places where Muslims and Buddhists live side by side.
Right, it creates this vicious cycle.
Exactly. Current events, feeding prejudices, making dialogue even harder.
It's a tough nut to crack. And then there's the role of religious leaders.
Yeah.
They have a lot of influence.
They can be powerful voices for peace.
Right, bridging divides, promoting tolerance.
We've seen some inspiring examples of imams and monks working together.
Yeah, building bridges between communities.
Exactly, but
There's a but coming.
there is. Sometimes, intentionally or not,
Okay.
they can actually make things worse.
By reinforcing stereotypes.
Yeah, or promoting exclusivist interpretations of their faith.
That highlights the need for education then. Critical thinking skills.
So people can engage in these conversations constructively.
So it's not just about getting religious leaders to talk.
Right.
It's about equipping them with the right tools
And their followers.
to have a nuanced conversation.
Exactly. Promoting religious literacy.
Helping people move beyond superficial understandings.
That's where our deep dive comes in, right? We're trying to provide that knowledge.
Yeah, giving people the insights to engage more thoughtfully.
Exactly.
But what about those really tough conversations? The ones that get really heated?
Oh, I know what you mean.
Like when we start talking about those historically sensitive figures.
You mean like those online debates comparing Buddha and Muhammad?
Yeah, those.
Yeah.
They often devolve into arguments.
People defending their prophet, attacking the other.
It gets messy. How do we navigate that minefield?
It's not easy. Humility is key, I think.
Okay.
Recognizing that our understanding of these figures is always limited.
And open to interpretation.
Exactly.
So accepting that there are multiple perspectives.
Right, and focusing on the core values these figures embodied.
Instead of getting bogged down in historical details.
Yeah, like what can we learn from their teachings?
Shifting the focus from defending narratives to exploring deeper principles.
Well said.
And remembering that respecting your own prophet doesn't mean you have to put down someone else's.
Exactly. It's not a zero-sum game.
Right. Appreciating one doesn't diminish the other.
I like that. But how do we actually put that into practice?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question.
Well, this idea of critical tolerance is really important.
Critical tolerance. I've heard that term, but what does it actually mean in this context?
It means being able to see the differences between faiths
Okay.
while still recognizing the dignity and worth of every person.
Regardless of what they believe.
Exactly.
So being discerning but respectful.
Yeah, like you can disagree with an idea.
Without attacking the person holding that idea.
Exactly.
It's about critiquing ideas, not people.
challenging for sure.
Especially these days.
But it's crucial for genuine interfaith understanding.
It is. And our deep dive has definitely taken us through some complex terrain, hasn't it?
It has.
We've explored all these big religious concepts, the ups and downs of interfaith dialogue, even those potential pitfalls.
A lot to unpack.
But what does this all mean for our listeners? How can they use these insights in their own lives?
That's the big question, right? And one we'll tackle in part 3. Because at the end of the day, this knowledge is most valuable when we can actually use it.
Okay, so we've got some practical wisdom to share. Sounds like a plan.
Right.
We'll take a quick break and then dive into those actionable tips in part 3. Okay, so let's get down to brass tacks.
Time for the rubber to meet the road.
We've explored all these ideas about Islam and Buddhism.
The similarities, the differences.
Yeah, we even dug into some of those.
Spicy online debates.
Right.
But now...
How do you actually use this stuff?
Yeah, in your everyday life.
Especially when you're talking to people of different faiths.
So give us the goods.
The golden nuggets.
Yeah, how can we navigate these conversations with, like, grace and understanding?
And maybe even a little humor along the way.
Oh, definitely humor. I'm all about that.
All right, nugget number 1.
Okay, I'm ready.
Active listening.
Okay.
And I don't just mean like waiting for your turn to talk.
Right.
It's about really trying to get where they're coming from, even if you totally disagree with them.
Exactly.
So really putting yourself in their shoes.
Yeah, like ask clarifying questions.
Oh, yeah.
Repeat back what you've heard.
To make sure you understand.
Right, and don't just jump in with your own arguments before they've even finished their thought.
It's about building bridges, not walls.
Exactly.
And that leads to the next nugget, right?
Yep.
Being aware of your own biases.
We all have them.
Shaped by, like, how we were raised, our culture, everything.
Exactly. It's like these mental filters that can distort how we see other faiths.
So how do we even start to recognize those biases?
Gotta be willing to question yourself.
Oh, okay.
Consider other viewpoints, right?
Right.
Your way of seeing the world isn't the only one.
A little humility goes a long way.
Oh, for sure. And that brings us to another key point, focusing on shared values.
Okay, like what?
Despite all their differences, Islam and Buddhism have common ethical principles.
Okay.
Like compassion, generosity, honesty.
Basic human goodness. So finding those universal values that connect us.
Yeah, that's where you can build alliances, not adversaries.
I like that. But what about when the conversation gets tricky?
Ah, yes, the sensitive topics.
Where things could get heated.
Well, that's where choosing your words carefully becomes like an art form.
So no inflammatory language.
Right, no stereotypes or generalizations.
That could be hurtful or offensive.
Exactly. And always think about the context.
Okay.
Who are you talking to?
Right.
What impact will your words have?
So it's about being tactful and respectful, even when you disagree.
Well said.
Okay, what else?
This one's important. Be open to learning.
Oh, yeah.
See these conversations as a chance to grow.
Not just as a debate, you have to win.
Exactly. Approach it with curiosity, a genuine desire to expand your understanding.
Like having a beginner's mind.
Yes. Be willing to step outside your comfort zone, see the world from a different angle.
Even if you don't agree with everything, you can still learn something. It's like the mind is not a vessel to be filled, but a fire to be kindled.
Beautifully put. And lastly, remember, this is a journey, not a destination. You'll have moments of clarity, connection, but also some frustration along the way.
It's about building relationships.
Exactly. Fostering trust, having those ongoing conversations.
Being patient, because real change takes time.
It does. It's about planting seeds.
That might take a while to sprout.
But who knows? Those seeds might grow into something amazing.
Enriching our lives and the world around us.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So, to sum it up,
active listening, checking your biases, finding those shared values.
Choosing your words carefully, being open to learning.
And remembering it's all a process.
Oh, and one more thing.
Yeah.
Don't forget to laugh.
Humor? Yes.
A little laughter can ease the tension.
Shows you're approaching it all with a human touch.
Exactly. Recognizing that shared humanity that connects us all.
Well, on that note of shared humanity and a good laugh, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive.
What a journey. We've covered so much ground.
Big ideas, practical tips.
Hopefully you're walking away with some food for thought.
And remember, this is just the beginning.
Keep exploring.
Keep learning.
Keep talking to each other.
Our world is a richer place because of its diversity.
Embrace it.
Beautifully said. And who knows, maybe your next conversation with someone from a different faith will spark something new, something amazing.
A new understanding, a new connection.
Exactly. So until next time, happy exploring.